Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're going to be doing part 36 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlight, where we take a look at a bunch of different mods people have been making to have all the wonderful diversity of the animals that we have today, and plus a couple extras and things like that. But I'm really excited to get into this one. We all know Rihanna, or Ronmayron. She has been making a lot of birds, and today we don't have just 2 of her birds, we have 4. So we've got plenty of her birds to show off, plus an extra bird, and we have a very nice assortment of non-mammals here today, so that's very cool. So, as I mentioned, by Ronmayron, this is going to be the first one of her birds. We have got the Cabbage Tracker Pan. We'll have a look at a male here, that's a female. Where's the male? There they are. This is the Cabbage Tracker Pan, also known as the Chinese Tragopan, or the yellow-bellied Tragopan. So these guys are pretty plump, ground-dwelling birds that you can see with these short legs. The males usually grow to a length of about 60 centimeters, or about 24 inches, and weigh about 1.4 kilograms, or 3 pounds, while the females is about 10 centimeters shorter and weighs a little bit under a kilo, about 0.9 kilos, or 2 pounds. And you can see the head of the male here is quite reddish, with orange streaks. You can see the reddish-orange streaks here, and also the red parts. And you can see also the bare skin here that they use. They often inflate it. They have inflatable bottles similar to other Tragopans that they use to display. And you can also see they've got like this really interesting body. They got like these the males actually have these little horns. I don't think they're really shown here, but it looks really wonderful. And you can see the female, comparably, is not quite as colourful like most other birds, quite drab, but you can see how wonderful the male is. Where's another male? There's another male. And you can see they've got a little bit like orange in there as well, but they also have quite whitish if you compare it to the Timrix Tragopan. Not quite as bold reddish. This one's a lot more white, but I think it's really cool regardless. So these guys are endemic to the mountain ranges of southeastern China, and are present in the provinces of Fujian or Guangdong, Hunan, Zhejiang, Xinjiang, and don't ask me about how to pronounce that. Don't get mad at me. I'm not fluent in Chinese, but look at these wonderful animals. So yeah, we're going to be moving on to the behavior. So these guys feed mostly on the ground, like other sort of Tragopans. They forage on roots, shoots, buds, flowers, and berries, pretty much just any sort of assortment, but they'll also eat small invertebrates as well. It's a good supplement. Really wonderful. So breeding takes place for these guys in the spring, and they have this really elaborate courtship ritual that they do, obviously to get females, where they'll what they'll do is they'll get their nest is built in a fork in a tree, and they'll put grasses and mosses in that as well for the nesting. But in terms of their display, as I mentioned, they've got these really big wattles and such that they can inflate and use for display like other Tragopans. And the clutch for these guys is usually about 2 to 6 eggs, and the incubation is only really done by the female, so the male kind of just goes and does his own thing. And the eggs will hatch about 28 days after, and the female will brood the young for 2 to 3 days after that. Then they will all leave the nest together, the chicks being able to fly soon after the hatch, and they will all remain together until the winter. We'll talk about the babies while we're here. We don't want to look at you, Dad. These are wonderful babies. So they'll stick with Mum and the parents until winter, where they will join another family group or hang out in a small group, so they kind of just do their own thing. Yeah, really wonderful animal. I love Cabots because, as I mentioned, with the inflatable bottles, it really gives like a really unique look. That's something you've never seen in the fossil record, because obviously, unless it's like preserved. I just think that's so cool. I really love Tragopans. But these guys are considered vulnerable by the IUCN, sadly, because there is estimated to be fewer than 10,000 individuals, and their populations are decreasing, sadly. And the main threats these guys face is obviously, of course, loss of habitat, which has been converted to plantations for conifers or bamboo or agricultural land, which reduces the availability of nesting sites and food and things. But also it is hoped that they could provide artificial nesting sites that could help boost the population. Luckily, the bird is present in some protected areas, but they are mostly small, and illegal hunting still takes place in some of these areas. So that is good. They are at least in some areas where they're protected, but obviously illegal hunting is also a bad thing. So yeah, really wonderful animal. So we've got another bird by Rihanna, or Ronmayron. We've got the Reefs Pheasant. So we're moving on from Tragopans to pheasants. So we've got the really wonderful Reefs Pheasant. Let's see if we can find a male. Look at him. Look at this wonderful guy. So the Reefs Pheasant is a large pheasant that is endemic to China as well, and it's got its name after the British naturalist John Reefs, who was introduced live specimens to Europe. Like, he didn't introduce them, but he showed off the animal to other naturalists and other people in Europe in about 1831. So the males measure about 210 centimeters long and weigh about 1.5 kilograms, or about 3.3 pounds. And you think, oh, that's pretty long, but they have very, very long tail feathers. In fact, they have the longest natural tail feathers of any bird species, which can measure up to 2.4 meters, or 7.9 feet long. So it's very, very long tail feathers that they use for display. Obviously, the males do. And you can see they have this really, really bright plumage with like this scaled golden white body. You can see here, really beautiful. And they have white and black around the head, and this narrow band of red across the eyes that you can see there. Really, really wonderful. And the males have these extremely long chivalry white tails barred with, you can see, this kind of chestnut with also black and white patterning. That is what we mentioned before. Really, really wonderful. So females are not quite as big. Females measure about 75 centimeters long from tip of the beak to tip of the tail feathers, and weigh about 949 grams, or a little under a kilo, or about 2 pounds. And they are kind of brown. Let's see if we can find a female. We can see here they're kind of a lot more drab, but they're kind of brown with a blackish crown, bluff face, or a buff face, with greenish brown banded tail feathers that you can see here. So not too flashy and incredible as the male, but still really, really cool. So these guys are endemic to the evergreen forests of central and eastern China, and when introduced they also inhabit like farmland and close to woodlands. And the tail of the birds grow approximately 30 centimeters every year, so they do get bigger and bigger and bigger. Let's see if we can find a male here to look at. There he is, wonderful. But they've got injuries. I was thinking those injuries. I think he looks wonderful anyway. Really wonderful bird. So they have been introduced as sort of an ornamental species, and also for sport, into the United States, the Czech Republic, France, and the United Kingdom. And in the latter 3 centuries, they have built up small populations and are still released on a small scale for shooting, alongside common pheasants. So they're not particularly established a huge population, they're just kind of managed because they are a sport animal. And the reef pheasant is thankfully a very hardy bird that can tolerate both cool and warm temperatures, and they prefer higher ground for nesting. The female lays a clutch of about 7 to 14 eggs in April or May, and the incubation period is usually about 20 to 25 days. We'll grab a baby while we're talking about him. Where is he? Wonderful little guy. So, cool little fella here. And Reefs pheasants can be often aggressive towards humans, and including, well, obviously humans are animals, but other animals as well, and other pheasants, and that can be specifically quite obvious during the breeding season. And their call is unlike other game birds, where they have like this musical wattle, which you can't really tell here because they're just the peacock sounds, but it sounds almost more like a passerine bird or a singing perching bird rather than a galliform bird or a pheasant or any type of fowl. And they have a very interesting diet. Their diet is usually vegetable matter that includes seeds and cereals, and they are found fairly common in aviculture, so they're a common bird for people to keep. I think they are wonderful regardless. So now we're going to be moving on to another bird, so we're going to move on to another pheasant. We're going to be going through these pheasants quite efficiently. So we got the blood pheasant. So also known as the blood partridge, done by Ronmayron. It should be here. Wait, is that loadouts? What are you doing here? That's a golden pheasant. You shouldn't be in here. Anyway, here is a blood pheasant. So, also known as the blood partridge, they are part of the pheasant family, of course. They are a very kind of small, short-tailed pheasant that are widespread and fairly common in the eastern Himalayas. So they range from India, Nepal, Bhutan, China, and northern Myanmar. Yeah. And their population has been slowly decreasing, but they have been evaluated by least concern by 2009. So these guys are pretty small for general pheasant. They get about 43 centimeters in length, with this very short and convex bill that you see here, a little black bill, along with the feathered between the eyes, and they have some various colored pheasants. So you can see the color of the plumage on top is like this dark ashy color with these white shafts as well. And the coverts are kind of tipped green that you can see on the side here. But they really kind of get their name from the crimson like margins here, especially on their chest and their tails. It kind of resembles like they've bloodied, but I think it just looks like a really wonderful pattern. Also, both male and females will have red feet, as you can kind of see here. And they have a distinct ring of bare skin around the eyes that you can see here. That is usually crimson colored, but orange in a few of the different subspecies, which is pretty interesting. So these guys are found in the mountains of Nepal, northern Myanmar, Tibet, and central and south central China, where they can be found in mixed forest or coniferous forests near the snow line, and they move their range depending on the seasons, and they're usually found in higher elevations during the summer and lower ones during the winter, where they will move to lower elevations, which is pretty cool. Let's see if we can find a female. There's a female here. Looks wonderful. So, unlike the common pheasant, these guys are monogamous, and breeding season will start around the end of April, when males begin their courtship by displaying in front of females, or fighting each other breast to breast and kind of biting their wattles and kicking at each other, which is a pretty wonderful display. And the females will choose these guys based on tail length, the air tufts, and the presence of black points on their wattle. That's what they find attractive. And the blood pheasant usually reaches sexual maturity at about a year old, where in early May, mature females begin nesting under the paddy straw heaps, surrounded by trees and in bush caves and small caves or in trees, and they will excavate shallow pot-like nests that you see and line them between the moss and the pine needles and feathers. So let's have a look at the babies. There's the babies. There is the babies. So, the females lay about 4 to 14 yellow-white eggs with brown speckles on them, at intervals about 2 to 3 days. And during the 27 to 33 days of egg incubation, the male is responsible for defending the territory and from other male pheasants and potentially predators while the female incubates. So, what's interesting as well is that the blood pheasant's distribution in inhospitable high elevation environments, they have acquired adaptations for hypoxia and high levels of ultraviolet radiation, so they have adapted to those conditions, and they will move with the snowline while foraging, feeding on moss, ferns, pine shoots, and lichens. So that's also pretty cool. And these guys are considered least concern likely, but however, more half of the population is considered under threats due to habitat loss and fragmentation, illegal harvesting, and human disturbance. And much of these guys' range actually, especially in southwest China, overlaps with the giant pandas range, and livestock grazing has become the most prevalent human disturbance across these areas. So these would be one of the animals that could benefit from large population protections of pandas, as their habitat would obviously be something that would be everyone wants to protect. So that's really, really awesome. And also, their ground nesting habits and their long incubation period makes them very vulnerable to trampling by, obviously, livestock and habitat degradation by grazers. So yeah, really, really wonderful blood pheasant. So these last 3, and this last pheasant is going to be by, of course, everyone's favorite Rihanna, Ronmayron. Starting with the last one, we have got the golden pheasant. So this is kind of the one that everyone's one of the most famous, if not the famous. So the golden pheasant, also known as the Chinese pheasant or the rainbow pheasant, are a type of game bird, as you see here, that are found in the mountainous areas of western China, but feral populations have been set up all across the world, from United Kingdom to the US to Chile, Argentina, the Falkland Islands, Netherlands, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand, with a few other different countries in between. And they've actually have been found in the Isles of Sicily, which is also pretty cool. The adult males get 90 to 105 centimeters long, also to 35 to 41 inches. But the tail accounts for probably about 2/3 of that total length. And they're pretty much unmistakable because they have this really beautiful golden crest and rump and a bright red body. And they have a deep orange cape that can be spread during display. And they have this alternating black and orange fan that you can see goes back to here. Looks really, really wonderful. You can see the males also have this golden yellow red crest with a hint of red at the tip, and there's a really, really charismatic kind of color. And you can see, you compare that to the wonderful bright colored males, and then you see the females of quite a bit more drab, but they still have a really cool, nice pattern to them. They are obviously duller, mottled brown pattern that is quite similar to the female common pheasant, but you can see it's got this more distinctive lines and stuff. I still think it's very interesting by itself. But both males and females have these really, really yellow legs and yellow bills, which is also pretty cool. So these guys feed on the ground on grain, leaves, and invertebrates, but they will roost in trees during the night. And during the winter, flocks tend to forage close to human settlements and on the edge of the forests, taking primarily wheat leaves and seeds. And they can fly clumsily for short bursts, but they prefer to run and spend most of the time on the ground. And if startled, they can suddenly burst upwards with a great rate of speed and have this distinctive wing call. Wing sound, I think is actually the proper pronunciation. But look at this wonderful little baby here. So golden pheasants lay about 8 to 12 eggs at a time and will incubate these for about 22 to 23 days. And they tend to eat, as I mentioned, berries, grubs, seeds, and other types of vegetation. And the males will have this really cool metallic core during the breeding season. And are very, very commonly seen in... We'll have a look at these guys have a fight. So they're very, very common in the aviculture scene because they're very, very beautiful. But there is often hybrid specimens as well, as they are the similar Lady Amber's pheasant, which we'll see in the next episode. I've got them planned. They often are interbred. There's often hybrids there, so it's not very likely most of them are pure. But also in captivity, you get all sorts of different mutations of the golden pheasant, such as the dark-throated, the yellow crimson, salmon peach, splash mahogany, and silver. In aviculture, you can see this wild type is referred to as the red golden. So this is kind of the animal that you find in the wild, where you can get all sorts of different mutations in aviculture. And this is what they kind of call it, the red golden, to differentiate it between these different mutations that you can get. So yeah, another wonderful animal. So all these 4 pheasants, just to clarify, all done by Ronmayron or Rihanna. But now we're going to move on to another very interesting bird. So this was done by Leaf and Monsoon. So these guys are going to be pretty much dominating today's mod spotlight. We have got the green pheasant, or the Indonesian pheasant. So really wonderful guy here. So this peafowl species is native to the tropical forests of Southeast Asia and has been listed as endangered by the IUCN, sadly. But these guys are very, very different, as you can see here, from the Indian peafowl that you guys are probably quite familiar with. Also in the base game. That's really cute. So these guys are quite similar in appearance, especially in the wild, but obviously the males have these kind of much bigger tail feathers, of course. And in the male, they can extend up to 2 meters and are decorated with these eye spots, very similar to the Indian peafowl. And the main difference, of course, you can see here, the Indian peafowl is not quite as green. This has got a much more greenish tint to its body. Really, really wonderful. And they're also more silent than Indian peafowl. And they are very large. They're among the largest living galliforms, but they are very light compared to wild turkeys. And perhaps the longest. So they can get to about 1.8 to 3 meters long, or 5 feet 11 to 9 feet 10 in total length. But their tails measure about 1.4 to 1.6 meters, or about 4 4'7" or 5'3", so quite big, long tail feathers, as tall as a person. And the tail converts even longer than those of the adult male Indian peafowl, but shorter than those of the crested Argus pheasants. And the adult female is about half that length of a breeding male. They get about 1 to 1.1 meters, or 3'3" to 3 feet 7 inches, and have a relatively large wingspan, average about 1.2 meters, and can reach 1.6 meters in big males. And you can see these guys are capable of sustained flight and often observed on the wings, so they are capable of flight. Really wonderful animals here. So these guys are mostly found a lot more around Southeast Asia. They're found in northeastern India, northern Myanmar, southern China, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Java, and Malaysia. And they occupy a quite wide range of habitats, including primary and secondary forests that are both tropical and subtropical, as well as evergreen and deciduous forests. They will also be found in bamboo, grasslands, savannas, scrubs, and farmland edges. And in Vietnam, the preferred habitat is found to be dry deciduous forest away from human disturbance. So that's a pretty interesting thing about them. We'll have a look at the female. See, female pretty much looks the same, except she doesn't have the huge tail feathers. And what's really interesting about these guys is they have a much different behavior than Indian peafowl. These guys are a forest bird that nest on the ground, laying up to 3 to 6 eggs. But these guys are polygamous, but they, unlike the Indian peafowl, the males are solitary and do not display in lurks like the Indian peafowl. These guys are solitary and are highly territorial, where they will form harems with no pair bonds, so they kind of just maintain a territory, and all the females within the territory are theirs. And if another male comes, they'll come and defend them. But however, this theory seems to conflict with observation in captivity, and pairs left alone with no human interaction have been shown to be strongly monogamous. And this close similarity between both sexes also suggests a different breeding strategy in contrast to the Indian peafowl. And it's assumed that the harems seen in the field are juvenile birds, and the males are not promiscuous. So I think that's pretty interesting, that even though it's a pretty common animal, there's a lot we don't know about it. So they usually spend most of the time on or near the ground in tall grass and sedges. Families units roost at about trees at a height of 10 to 15 meters, and the diet mostly consists of fruit, invertebrates, reptiles, frogs, and rodents. And like other members of its genus, they've actually been known to hunt snakes, venomous snakes as well. Also ticks, termites, flower petals, mud leaves, and berries are favourite foods of these peafowl. Have a look at the baby while we're having a look at you. Look at you, little wonderful fella. Very, very cute. So due to hunting and an extent of quality of the habitat, so there's not a lot of habitat left for this guy, especially in Southeast Asia. As well as poaching, these guys are considered endangered by the IUCN, where their world population is declined rapidly, and the species no longer occurs in a lot of areas in its range. And the last sort of protected areas are found in Thailand, Vietnam, and Java, with the wild population being between 5,000 and 10,000 individuals around 1995. And although there was no natural overlap between the Indian peafowl and the green peafowl, there is a threat of hybridization because either one could be introduced in their populations and produce fertile offspring. And in captivity, these have been called Spalding peafowls and are used by breeders to create different breeds. And though brack crossing, some hybrids become almost indistinguishable from pure greenfowl. And they also sometimes call in aviculture the Java peafowl, or the subspecies of the green peafowl, is also mixed in captivity. So it's kind of very hard mixing, because hybridization can be a blessing and a curse in animal populations. Sometimes it could introduce genetic diversity in populations. Sometimes it can affect their reproductive success. So it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of breeding. But these guys are still really wonderful. Hopefully they haven't gone extinct. They won't go extinct. But I just love these guys. They're really wonderful. So this was done by Leaf and Monsoon. And the next one is also done by Leaf and Monsoon. So this is not a bird this time. We've gone through all our birds. Now we're going to be going on to the mammals. So we have got the giant Mojac. Really cool guy here. Really, really wonderful. So The giant Mojac, sometimes known as the large antlered Mojac, is very, very elusive. It is a species of Mojac that is the largest and was discovered only in 1994 in Vietnam and central Laos. And during this induction, when they found it, there were about 38 giant Mojacs that were captured, studied, and released into the natural protected area that they were found in. And subsequent radio tracking of the sample showed that was successful, and the species is now located well in southern Cambodia, eastern Cambodia, as well as the Turon Son Mountains. So, luckily, they are translocated populations that have been successful. So there's not really much known about this guy. The giant Mojac is found in evergreen forests and weigh between 66 to 110 pounds, or about 30 to 50 kilograms. And you can see have this reddish-brown coat and is an even-toed ungulate, similar to other Mojacs and deers and stuff. And due to the slash and burn agriculture, that's been a very common agricultural practice in Southeast Asia, combined with hunting as well, they're considered critically endangered, along with animals like the sowler that live in a similar habitat. They have been put at risk since it's a very restricted habitat. And they are preyed upon by animals such as tigers and leopards, and are closely related to the Indian Mojac. So, yeah, there's not too much known about this guy. They look really wonderful, though. Let's have a look at is this the baby? Look at the baby. Very, very cute. So, kind of sad. These guys are critically endangered. There's no really estimates on their population, sadly. But yeah, still a really cool animal regardless. And Leaf and Monsoon, you did a good job. So now we're going to be moving on to the next animal. So we got a fish this time. We have got the Beluga Sturgeon, which is also just called the beluga, which is very obviously confusing with the whale, the beluga whale. This is also known as the Beluga Sturgeon or the Great Sturgeon. These guys are a species of fish that are found in the sturgeon family and are primarily found across the Caspian and Black Seas, and are the third most massive living species of bony fish, and sadly they are critically endangered by overfishing and poaching. So these guys can get pretty huge. So the largest recorded specimen is a female that was taken in 1827 from the Volga estuary that weighed 1,571 kilograms, or 3,463 pounds, and 7.2 meters, or 23 feet 7 inches long. Another specimen weighed about 1,220 kilograms, or 269 pounds, and was measured about 20 feet long, or about 6.1 meters. And there have been several other reports of big sturgeons over 5 meters long and over a ton, so that's very, very huge. So they actually rival the largest fish, the ocean sunfish, and are the second longest fish after the giant oarfish, and also the largest freshwater fish in the world. That's bony fish, just to clarify. And these guys are androgynous fish. That means they will migrate up rivers from rivers to spawn on clean, hard surfaces, where often they both support the cover and the sticky, adhesive eggs. So they kind of will swim up to the rivers, kind of like salmon. You know how salmon will swim up fresh water and then will lay their eggs in kind of the sand or rocks, and that's kind of how they do it. So they will swim. It appears to explain why these guys have the same long maturing species. They can be found up to 1,700 kilometers upstream, while they spawn at just 100 kilometers, so it kind of just really depends. It's really, really interesting. And males will usually reach sexual maturity at about 12 to 16 years old, where the females do so at about 16 to 22, and they will spawn every 4 to 7 years. And at one time, beluga sturgeons could migrate up to 1,000 kilometers upstream, but dams and almost every major tributary has utilized that, has impeded that. So it's been a big issue for these guys because of dams that blocks their migration patterns. So now they kind of just spawn where they can, which kind of sucks. And the female will lay her eggs on gravel from 4 to 40 meters underwater. And upon hatchling, the little guys are only about 11 to 14 millimeters. And 10 to 14 days later, they will absorb the yolk sac and reach a length of about 18 to 20 millimeters. and the larvae will usually just hang around and subsist on benthic invertebrates until they reach at least 10 centimeters long or 3 inches, where they will start eating fish and then swim back to the ocean, and they may cover up to 60 kilometers in that a day. So these guys are also a pelagic predator, so they will feed in open water, while the juveniles will eat on benthic invertebrates in shallow coastal waters and rivers. They grow quite quickly, and then the adults will become piscivorous. So they'll kind of eat pretty much just whatever large fish they can get their mouths around. But they have also been found to take mollusks, crustaceans, young seals, and aquatic birds. And you can see the kind of brackish environments. They'll feed on all sorts of different things, cuttlefish, really much anything they can get their mouths around. They're a big, cool predator, and I like it, Beluga sturgeons. So one of the uses they have is considered a delicacy. It's Beluga Caviar, which is their roe, which is obviously what they use to make eggs. It's like a heavily white, and the flesh of these guys is not particularly renowned, but it's a hearty white meat similar to swordfish. And the caviar has largely been scarce and expensive because of the fish endangered status, and it makes the caviar the most expensive in the world. And sadly, these guys, as I mentioned, are critically endangered. They're a protected species, luckily, and the Mediterranean population has been strongly protected as well. And the US Fish and Wildlife has banned imports of beluga caviar and other products after listing it as endangered. But luckily, there's also the Sturgeon Aqua Farms in Florida has been the first and only facility in the world to permit exemption of sale of beluga sturgeon and its caviar in the US, and since that company has assisted in repopulation efforts, luckily, by providing over 160,000 fertilized eggs for the Caspian Sea region. So I think it's really, really cool that both commercial and conservation are working well with these species, and hopefully that helps in the future, because beluga sturgeons are, of course, a very important part of the ecosystem, being top predators. And yeah, really wonderful animal. We hope to see them off critically endangered. I want to see them least concerned. That's what I want to see. So yeah, really, really wonderful animals. So that was done by that was by Africa. That was imported by BuffZoo from Endless Ocean 2. And also GiornoPizza helped probably make it a new species. Thank you guys. So the next animal, second to last, we've got a sand cat. That was made by NATY-MGR-BongoHardwood-GiornoPizza-Seth, and Seth. So it's a very collaborative effort, you could say. So let's have a look at these wonderful guys here. Very, very cute. That's a kitten, I believe. No, that is a kitten. Let's see if you can find the adults. There's the adult, juvenile. There we are, there's the adult. So we have got this wonderful little sand cat here. So the sand cat, also known as the sand dune cat, you can see is a very small wild cat that inhabits the sandy and stony deserts far from water sources, and they kind of have this really, really cool light grey fur and is well camouflaged in its desert environment. The head to body length of these guys ranges from 39 to 52 centimeters or 15 to 20 inches, with a 23 to 31 centimeter long tail that's 9 to 12 inches. Its 5 to 7 centimeter or 20 to 22.8 inch short ears are set along the sides of its head, which they can use for detecting prey moving underground. And you can see also it's got these long hairs that cover its paws that insulate its paws against the extreme hot and cold temperatures in the desert. So these guys are primarily adapted for living in the desert. So that's pretty cool. The first sand cat known to science was discovered in the Algerian Sahara Desert in 1858, and to date they have been recorded in several distinct locations in Morocco, Algeria, Niger, Chad, Egypt, Arabian Peninsula, the Middle East, and in Central Asia, which is pretty cool. You can see the large gap of these two regions was partly closed in 1984, where there were sand cat skins found on an oasis in Oman. So it's kind of weird that they have these two really big disjunct populations, but it seems there was a lot more movement between them that we kind of don't know about. And luckily, due to their wide distribution, and they have a very large population, they are listed as least concerned by the IUCN. So the sandcat as well usually rests in underground dens, and during the day they will kind of rest in these dens and then hunt out at night. They can move up to about 5.4 kilometers or 3.4 miles on average in the night, where they will look for things such as small rodents, birds, and they actually have a reputation among the Tarang people of the Genera Desert, where they have been observed killing venomous snakes. So that's very, very cool. Now, I know these kittens are bigger than adults just because you can't just change the size of the babies, but they're really cool is that the female will give birth to usually about 2 to 3 kittens, which become sexually matured at about 1 year old. And sadly, the sandcat's ecological requirements are still poorly understood just because they live in very isolated and hard-to-study habitats. But there have been a few in-depth studies trying to learn more about them. But yeah, still really, really wonderful animals. I really do like my sandcats. So now we've got our lucky last animal. So I hope this hasn't been too long an episode, but we get out the last animal. This was done by Leaf and Monsoon. We have got the finished forest reindeer. So these guys are a very rare subspecies of reindeer that are native to Finland and northeastern Russia. And they are primarily found in the Russian Kali in the provinces of North Kali, Sovia, and Kanu in Finland, and through central South Finland. And they are distinct from the semi-domesticated mountain deer for their large size, and what they do is prefer boreal habitats, and they're very rarely seen by humans over in the open tundra. And these guys are also one of the largest subspecies of reindeer, I mean. They get about 180 to 220 centimeters long, with a tail that is about 10 to 15 centimeters. The adult males are larger, weighing about 150 to 250 kilograms, with adult females weighing around 100 kilograms. You can see they've got these longer legs, wider hooves, and they have these narrower antlers. You can see here, this is the female, I think. We'll have a look at the male here. You can see comparatively they have much narrower antlers and larger feet and such. So they are very, very well adapted for moving through both deep snow, but also much narrower habitats. As you can see, a lot of other reindeer subspecies live in the open tundra, while these guys will live in boreal forests, so they need to be a bit more compact to walk through them. Really, really wonderful. So, in the 17th century, these guys reigned all across Finland and western Russia, but sadly, hunting, reindeer husbandry, and habitat degradation through forestry basically nearly caused their extinction in Finland by the end of the 19th century. But luckily there was a small population of about 1,000 that also thrive in the southern Obesk. And while the populations are recovering in Finland, they've been suggesting that an increasing returning wolf population may be partly responsible for their slow recovery. So the estimates of the Finland population range from 850 reindeer to up to 2,000 or 3,000. But I think the population in Russia is probably about a few thousand more. And there seems to be a population of about 150,000 in 150 forest reindeer in 25 European zoos. 150,000 deer in zoos, that would be wild. So they're part of a conservation management plan. There's a population management plan with a stud book that's used to manage these populations across zoos and stuff, so they can help with also wild populations and things like that. We'll have a look at the baby while we're talking about them. So look at this little guy sleeping. And these guys are often compared to another population such as the boreal woodland caribou from Canada. And they're also forest dwelling and avoid humans and experiencing a decline in their populations, even though they are threatened. This sees that reindeer are kind of a very, very wide ranging animal. See, they range from pretty much Europe to Canada. So they have a very wide range, and there's lots of different subspecies within that, since they have such a large range. And there are sort of overlaps, and some subspecies have kind of independently adapted to live in these boreal habitats, while some still carry on living in the open tundra. So I think that's really, really cool. So there is about 1,000, I think, thrive in the Shalakovy National Park in Russia, but also maybe up to 2,000 to 3,000, or about 850 in Finland. So yeah, really cool animal. Obviously the whole species, I believe, is least concerned, but this population is considered endangered or near threatened. So yeah, still really, really cool animals. And yeah, I think this will be a great place to end the episode. So I really, really, really hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to click the little bell icon to get notified when I upload anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.